Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Good morning, everyone. I say it again. We can't be despondent now. It's a new year. We shouldn't. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and Happy New Year. My name is Tajuddin Ahmed. I'm the chairman of the Programs Committee of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, NBCC. It is my pleasure to welcome you all, both physically and virtually, to this January breakfast meeting, which is themed 2025 Economic Outlook. I'm particularly delighted to see our council and ESCO members, our distinguished speaker, Professor Biodun Adedipe, the moderator, who just flew in from Tanzania after covering the African Heads of States Energy Summit, Mr. Bosin Omofaye, big in stature and big in bank balance. And of course, all our esteemed guests this morning. Please rise as you observe the Nigerian and British national anthems. May you rise, please.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribes of differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace all battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hand unto our children a banner without stain. O God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help us to build our nation where no man is oppressed, and so with peace and plenty Nigeria may be blessed.
May we have our seats, please. Thank you, media, for those two national anthems. Before we begin, I would like us to think for a moment. If you could predict just one economic shift this year, what would that be? And how would you prepare for it? You should take that, put that in your mind at the Q&A session. We'll be able to expound much on that. In the words of the great Warren Buffett, opportunities come infrequently. When it rains gold, put out the bucket, not the thimble. For those who are aware, the thimble is a small metal or plastic cap that is close-ended. It's used for when knitting or sewing. is used to protect the finger. So Warren Buffett tells us to prepare for opportunities and put out our bucket rather than put out the thimble. As we gather here today at the start of a new year, it is evident that 2025 presents both challenges and golden opportunities. The question remains, how well are we prepared to seize those opportunities? Before we dive into the heart of today's agenda, please allow me to share a few housekeeping guidelines to ensure a smooth and enjoyable experience for all. For physical attendees, questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you. For virtual attendees, if the volume is low, kindly check your system settings. This event is being recorded and is available live on our YouTube channel, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, NBCC. For comments and discussions, please use the chat icon. Kindly submit your questions via the Q&A tab, and only questions so submitted will be addressed during the Q&A session. For posts on social media, please use the hashtag NBCC Economic Outlook 25. Before I bring on our president to come and give his welcome address, let me ask a general question. Are we excited about 2025? Or are we carrying the pessimism of 2024 into the new year? I'm seeing a lot of positive noddings, meaning that we're expectant of 2025. Actually, somebody actually raised his two hands to show how optimistic he is. We should all be optimistic. This is our country. We don't have any other. And we'll salvage it together, one hand at a time. Please join me as we welcome the leader of our ship, the captain of our aircraft, President Chairman of Council, Mr. Ray Artley, FRPA, to give his welcome address. The ovation is not loud enough. If NBCC were a country, this is the president and commander-in-chief of that country. Let's give him a rousing welcome.
Thank you. This is the very first major event of the chamber that we are having this beautiful new year, 2025. And so permit me once again to welcome you all to today's event. When I look around, I see a lot of distinguished Nigerians who have decided to come here today and share their thoughts with us. To begin, I want to recognize our patrons who are present today. We have Dr. Michael Olawale Cole, who just entered. You're welcome, sir. We have Prince Adedapo Adelegon, who is also a patron. He's here. Thank you, sir, for coming. We have Mrs. Adeyemi Bisi, who is here as well, a patron. Welcome. And the Deputy President, Mr. Akin Oshuntoki, is here. We have Vice Presidents here present. Mr. Adeyemi is here. You're welcome. And chairmen of different committees. We needed to do this protocol because this is the first time we are meeting formally in 2025. All other protocols duly observed. Again, I welcome you into a brand new year, 2025, and I think it's going to be a great ride. Great does not point us in the direction of whether it's going to be extremely positive or somewhat negative, but it's going to be a great ride. It means that there'll be a lot of momentous events that will happen, and we all need to brace up and see how we can continue to do well in spite of all odds. But I have a few issues that I think we need to look at. Every year we come together and we talk about the economic outlook, and it's almost becoming like what every organization similar to us does at the beginning of each year. But do we really do a comparative analysis? What was the inflation rate when we gathered here last year, and what is it today? Today is 34.8. The last time it was tracked at the end of 2024. Perhaps it's still there, or it's almost hit 35. We need to look back when we compare so that it will help us to know if we are going in the right direction or not. Inflation is key when you are looking at the performance of any economy, because if you've set an African record with inflation, then you need to do something, about it, because it portends something very dangerous, if not tamed. And of course, there are various schools of thought, very optimistic, who have opined that this year it will be brought down to about 25% from 34.8. I would want that to happen. But then you need to show us what are the drivers. How do we get there? It has to be proven. And I am sure that our distinguished speaker, Professor Adedikpe, will do justice to this and more. And then there are others who have joined us who will discuss his presentation and take our questions, so that at the end, when we leave this place, we will all be wiser for it. And I can't wait to sit back and listen. Insecurity has always been a challenge. In the last 5 years, at least, it's assumed even more significant dimensions. And whatever you do in the area of trying to shore up productivity within the economy may be eroded if that hydra-headed monster is not tamed. And so it's important to look at that, how it impacts what we are looking out for, a bright outlook for 2025. And haven't we continued, in spite of all we've been saying, to spend more than we should in medical tourism? A lot is going out of this economy as a result of that. Opportunities abound if the figures we hear are real. It means that those who want to invest in the medical sector in this country would have a lot to reap if they set standards that are global and they maintain it. How about educational tourism? The status symbol. My child is in England. In fact, I have 3 in England. No, the other one is at Harvard. All right? Perhaps those schools are taking advantage of the fact that there are gaps here when we talk about quality. Because if you look at the best schools that we have here, tertiary schools, and you compare them to the best overseas, they don't really measure up. And so there is opportunity there, right? Some British schools have come in lately into this economy. Charterhouse, they came in and they are raising standards. I hear there is a rugby school also coming, and it's going to give Charterhouse a run for their money. And by virtue of their location, they have an edge already. And there'll be many more like that. That is taking advantage of the investment opportunity in that area. So it's high time we start looking for schools that will really make our universities wake up and face up to the challenges of providing qualitative education, because this country is spending a lot in educational tourism. We have the wherewithal within. So let us fully utilize what we have, the manpower, the capacity domestically. And we've been talking about foreign direct investments. Every time we talk about it, it sounds like the magic bullet. If we can get foreigners to come invest in Nigeria, our economy will be great. No way. We need to emphasize domestic investments because there's a lot of money within this country. When our banks recently, in the bid to recapitalize, started raising funds to do so, how many of them got foreign capital to do this? But they were able to have their offerings oversubscribed with capital that lay within. Perhaps the foreigners will come later, but they want to watch you and see what you're doing. If you repose confidence in what is happening within your economy, then they will come. The CEO of Nigerian Exchange is here, and it will be interesting to hear his take on this, as well, because this country, if it's going to be great again, must engineer it from within. The friends from overseas will come, taking a cue from what we have done to support us, but not to lead, because what they bring is hot money. It comes in and is out. Our manufacturers, they've complained so much, low capacity utilization, and then for them to get funds to do this is difficult. But unfortunately, we can't have a separate facility for them, a separate bank for them, and one for the rest of the sector, so they would have to compete. But there are other areas where they need to be supported, because we need to show up domestic production so that we stop importing toothpicks and the rest of them, because it's high time we stop gloating over these issues and be specific. Let us not be too... We do PR for government more than the government itself. Let government do its business while we hit the nail on the head, and then take what we have to government to say, this is what our people are saying, and we think you should pay attention to this. But oftentimes, we tell them, don't worry, we will sell you. But do you know what you're selling? There are two sides to that coin. One is what the media presents. The other is the reality that you are not privy to, but you think you do. For what? Reality is what we need to face, so that when we have gatherings like this, it will worth your time. When you're done and you leave, you say, yes, one or two things I gained from here, and I'm going to see how I can take advantage of them. The high cost of funds, well, it affects everyone. If you're running a business and you want to borrow, the banks are running businesses too. And so they need to look at their costs and they fix their interest. Okay, so it's one dialogue that will never end. We will keep going to and fro. But it's important that we try to incentivize. All right, it's not just about cost of funds. We need to incentivize sectors so that, in spite of the high cost, they'll be able to operate. Those who are exporting, what incentives are we giving them, and how informed are they about those incentives? Okay, it's important that they know so that they can take full advantage of it. And that's one of the ways we can improve our economy this year. Need I talk about the energy challenge, or do we call it the energy crisis? The truth is, last year when we gathered, there was this expectation that, when Dangote refinery comes on stream, a lot will happen. They have the capacity to flood the market with products, and the cost will go down. I'm sure that we all shared in that optimism. Now, what's the reality today? Why has it changed? I'd like to hear from the experts because there's something we are not getting, or perhaps our optimism was unfounded. Is it a lack of capacity to supply enough to the domestic market? Or is the regulator interfering so much so that there is almost price setting? We will hear from the experts. I am not one. And finally, the infrastructural challenges that we have. You cannot grow the economy of a country if you do not solve such challenges. Power, road, and the rest of them. Are we optimistic that this year is going to change, it's going to be better? And in the midst of those challenges, do you in the private sector smell opportunities? Areas where you can collaborate with government, get some tax incentives, and provide some of these services so that you can continue to remain in business profitably and contribute towards making Nigeria great again. Nigeria will be great, no doubt, but it is not the platitudes and the slogans that will make it. It is what comes out of our collective resolve to do something and do it right, and pushing those who are involved with making policy so that they create the environment that will enable us, not foreigners alone, us, invest more in our country. So this morning we have gathered, and those who have joined us virtually, we are all excited, and hopefully at the end of this morning's session, we will all know better and be more optimistic about the opportunities that 2025 holds for all of us. Thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we applaud President Chairman of Council again. Mr. President has set a very pragmatic tone for today's discourse. And I like the punchy way he ended by saying Nigeria will be great again, but it won't be great by platitudes and sloganeering, but by actions. So you notice that we have 3 drinks, at the stool beside the moderator's chairs. We're not saying that our moderator should drink 3 bottles of drinks at the same time, but it's just to showcase one of our sponsors, 7-Up Bottling Company, for having graciously provided those drinks to us. Without much ado, we go to the sponsors video. We're starting from Zenith Carex International, a foremost logistics company. Without them, wouldn't have been here. One of our sponsors. Media, take it.
Here is a world where logistics is seamless, efficient, reliable, and delivery difference. Welcome to Nigeria, and welcome to Zenith Carex Express.
We are Nigeria's giant indigenous courier and logistics company with operations across Nigeria and globally. Our operations include supply chain and distribution, freight forwarding by sea and air, warehousing and cold chain management, express courier and parcel delivery, e-commerce logistics, and customized or tailored logistics operations.
Within Nigeria and beyond, we deliver and handle your logistics needs with professionalism and trust. Our professional team, with over 20 years of operations experience, understands the terrain and standards and can navigate every huddle to ensure timely clearing and delivery of your cargo or shipment. Working with our trusted network of partners, we are not only championing the logistics sector in Nigeria, we are fostering economic development, creating jobs, and supporting our people. Connect with Zenith Carex Express and experience the difference in our delivery.
Carax International, one of our sponsors. Next on the agenda table is the profile of the guest speaker. I think for me, the USP of the guest speaker is a very short profile. If we were to do justice to it, we won't leave here today. Very, very short. The guest speaker is someone who started in academia, went into operations by being an operator, a banker, an investment banker, and now he's telling people how to do it. So he's graduated from lecturing people how to do it to doing it, now telling businesses and individuals how to do it. A very short profile of Professor Biodun Adedipe. Professor Adedipe is the founder and chief consultant of B. Adedipe Associates Limited, BAA Consult, with over 44 years postgraduate work experience. I'm seeing some people looking at, they were not born when he started his career. With over 44 years of postgraduate work and professional experience in university teaching, investment banking, project finance, management, and financial consulting, as well as leadership in business and not-for-profit organizations. Biodun has had an illustrious career that took him through the University of Lagos, Enterprise Consulting Group, the World Bank, African Region, International Merchant Bank PLC, the famous IMB, and First City Monument Bank PLC. He received his doctorate degree in industrial economics, specializing in corporate finance, from the University of Lagos in 1989, and BSc Economics, first class, from the University of Ife. I think that demands a round of applause. You wouldn't have attended an Ife. At the time, it was University of Ife, not OAU, with the first class in economics, and you weren't brainy. Another round of applause. That was in 1980. And he bagged several awards in the process, including Sir Adam Thompson Scholarship as a visiting doctoral student to the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom in 1984. Biodun is a member of several respected professional bodies and membership organizations, including the Chartered Institute of Directors of Nigeria, where he is a fellow and also a council member. Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, where he is a fellow too. The Nigeria Economic Society, where he is a life member. American Economic Association, where he is a member. And the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where he is a council member. A caveat here, LCCI is a domestic chamber. NBCC is a bilateral chamber. We are number one in our own class. LCC might be number one with Port Harcourt Chamber of Commerce, Abuja Chamber of Commerce, but here we are the number one in our own sector. Biodun founded BAA Consult. Professor Adedipe, sorry for the broadside there. I just had to say it. Biodun founded BAA Consult in February 1993, and he served as a CEO for 30 whole years, from March 1994 up until May 2024, when he retired from the firm and transited into an advisory role as a chief marketing officer starting in June 2024. Obviously, he's not tired. He's retired, but not tired. Finally, Professor Adedipe sits on boards of some profit-seeking and not-for-profit organizations in diverse capacities as chairman, non-executive director, and independent director. I have the pleasure, the singular pleasure and honor to invite to come and make a 30-minute presentation, Professor Biodun Adedipe.
The President and Chairman of Council, the ESCO members, and the Council members of NBCC, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying very good morning to you all and Happy New Year. And happily also for me, the President has made a very good, precedent in terms of the protocols. And incidentally also, the central theme of his speech earlier actually speaks to what I have in mind to speak to this morning. And that is the repeated reference to opportunities. And I also say that advisedly. I've observed that when people are given the kind of opportunity I have this morning, they either go out there as a critic, in which case all they see are the negatives and challenges in the economy. Some, of course, like the cap I wear on occasions, come as policy advocates. But looking at this audience this morning, I take the dimension of coming to interpret what is happening in this economy and pointing out at where the opportunities lie. So some of the things I will say, therefore, will be a repeat of what our president has said. And that is the way I'm going to approach it. So thank you so very much, NBCC, for giving me this platform. Now, I have a deck of slides, 46 of them. I won't speak to all of them, speak to the key ones, but everyone will get, the slides. So those things I don't speak to directly, you can have them when you look through the slides. So let me proceed then this way. Which direction should I face to get this thing to respond to me? Okay. Okay, that's the control. All right. Thank you. Right. Now, sometime in 2024, I sat back and did a preview of all the economies around the world and then divided them into three. The advanced economies, the emerging economies, and those we commonly say are developing economies. Then I asked myself a simple question. Why are the advanced economies advanced? Why do developing economies still struggle? And I discovered that there are three basic things that divide countries into those categories. First is food deficit. And I found that those economies that had moved from developing to emerging and those that are evolving now as developed economies actually had successfully dealt with food deficit. And in particular, I pick out China and India. Coincidentally, the two most populated countries in the world. Between them, we'll be looking at about 2.8 billion people out of an estimate of about 8 billion of us on the face of the earth now. But beyond that, having conquered food deficit, they had a platform to now grow the economy into more important and higher value items in terms of production. The second I observed, and the president mentioned that in his speech, energy deficit. You need energy to power your economy, either from the perspective of powering your factories, your offices, your homes, and even the energy you consume when you burn fuel on the roads. Now, whenever there is deficit in that, there's a limit to which an economy can grow. The third one is what I call manufacturing deficit. And that, of course, relates to the fact that if you don't strengthen manufacturing, there's no way your economy can advance beyond where you are. So, and in fact, while the president was speaking, my mind went back to 1988. And that was when we had this industrial policy that we developed for Nigeria. I was one of the consultants then. And we looked at what was happening globally and asked ourselves a simple question. How can Nigeria emerge as an industrial powerhouse? So now, on the back of that also, in March 1990, and this is very, very important to mention, we had a conference in Paris. And the theme of the conference was, how do we make Africa become the manufacturing ground for the rest of the world? March 1990. But China took that basically and began something in 2004, specifically. And China came up with an infrastructure plan for 30 years on roads, on railways, on dry ports, basically logistics, that will enable you to start your factory in China anywhere in the country. So in 2008, I was in a small team that gave the same concept to our then President Yar'Adua, and we branded it Infrastructure Nigeria. Now, China is 10 times the landmass of Nigeria. So we can do infrastructure intensity at ratio 1 to 10 like China did. We can also enhance Nigeria as a land that will be intense in manufacturing. Now, apart from these three deficits, there are two others we've been talking about in Nigeria perennially. The president also made reference to that. Infrastructure deficit. And of course, we also talk about the issue of deficit in the area of education that I mentioned, in medical. So when you look at all of this, anywhere there is deficit, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pointer to opportunities. So now, going beyond that, and that's why I have this in my slides, that anyone whose mind is trained to identify opportunities will never surrender to or complain about problems. And it is very simple. Anywhere you encounter problems or challenges, all you see there are opportunities. So, and that is what I'm going to focus on. Now, we know there are challenges everywhere. But in my next slide here, I developed this in January 2023, that anyone doing business anywhere in the world, if you are in business profit seeking, you were facing 7 disruptions to your business at that time, January 2023. By August 2023, the list extended to 8. And then by the time we got into end of 2024, it had extended to 9. The latest addition being artificial intelligence, Gen AI, and predictive AI. 2023, artificial intelligence was basically in the realm of discourse. But by 2024, companies had adopted it and started applying it to their businesses in the areas of operations, in the areas of marketing, and then, of course, in strategy. So what we then say, therefore, is artificial intelligence is not a risk to business, neither is it a risk to jobs. Or some analysts will tell you that, artificial intelligence will take people's jobs. It won't. It won't take jobs at all. It's a mere tool. People who refuse to adopt AI and apply it in their jobs as those that will be left behind. Same thing applies to companies. And we know what happened this week between the leaders in AI globally and then what happened in China with DeepSeek. Okay? They will tell you the package and the solution we have for you will cost you $100 million. And then DeepSeek came and said $5 million. We deliver the same thing. So what it simply means is this. You are in business. Any business whatsoever, you are doing commodity sale. Because every product, every service has been commoditized, we say. So in which case, if you are going to succeed in doing business in the environment we are now, you must find a sweet spot that will distinguish between your entity and those who are in the same business with you. And it doesn't even end there. You go to bed today, you think you have no competitor, but you are successful in what you are doing. You wake up tomorrow and find 10 new players in that sector. So in which case, on an ongoing basis, innovation has become the central thing. You notice here, I accentuated geopolitics. Geopolitics is taking a new dimension. In fact, it took a new dimension since last week, Monday, when we began with Trump 2.0. Now, I have a slide here that gave a summary of everything that Donald Trump said when he was campaigning. I'm going to create a new department that will deal with government spending. And I'm going to make a private operator the head of that. He has chosen Elon Musk. All right? So, also he said he's going to deregulate some sectors to drive innovations. No problem with that. Unleash technology and the rest of them. Then he said, and this is the one that connects to Nigeria and other crude oil exporting countries. He said, I am going to open the space to drill oil. In fact, I used, this acronym. He said, drill, baby drill. Okay, that means anywhere you find fossil fuel, dig the ground, bring it out. We flood the market. They now came with his bully tactics. Place they call to Saudi Arabia. Reduce the price of crude oil. And then he said also now later to OPEC Plus. Reduce the price of crude oil. But of course, some of us look at that and say, the man doesn't understand that the price of any commodity is driven by the dynamics of the market. All right? So the issue now is, I have another slide later that speaks to that. But how will all of this play out? He said, look, China, I'm going to slam on you, tariff that can be up to 60%. And the rest of you, that means Nigeria inclusive. I will do between 10 and 20%. Because all I want to do is ensure that America is great again. What is commonly called MAGA. All right? But we also said, if he does that, That means whatever is imported into the US will become more expensive. That will trigger inflationary pressures in the US. All right? And when that happens also, the Fed will respond. We saw what the Fed did yesterday, holding its policy rate. Okay? But also, Powell made a remark because the media asked him that question. Have you already agreed the date we meet with Trump? He said, no, I haven't spoken to him. But all Trump is working towards is take away the independence of the Fed. The Fed is also defending that and saying that what we do is deal with the economy and the financial sector based on our mandate, which is inflation targeting. All right? Incidentally, that's what we also do in Nigeria, and I will speak to that shortly. Now, if what Trump does disrupts global supply chains and global trade, how will that affect the rest of us? One thing we are sure of is that initially, the dollar will gain value. And it began doing that last week. If you watch the market, from the beginning of last week till date, the dollar has been gaining value against its major trading currencies. All right? If that happens, that means countries that are exposed to dollar debts will now have to carry higher burdens. We'll talk to that later. I have a slide that summarizes the position of Nigeria in that area. So that's why I put a bold picture there, that Trump is a risk that every one of us has to manage. That's the reality. But he sits on top of the largest economy in the world. And not only that, he also sits on an economy where the population is the third in terms of number. And that is quite significant. We are number 6, Nigeria, with an estimated 235 million Nigerians currently. But there are some advantages that I will also point to as we go. Now, beyond Trump, let's now come to our own geography. That's Nigeria. In the last 1.5 years, there have been major reforms. I call it reform bouquet. But the key thing I put here is that, yes, as Joe Benashaw said, progress is impossible without change. That's what reforms represent. But any change that is reversible can be risky. And so what we normally say is that once a country embarks on reforms, they should not, because of the immediate fallout of it, the inconvenience, discomfort that comes with it, now say we're going to reverse. Because typically when you do reforms, you arrive at a new equilibrium. So your planning forward will now begin from that new equilibrium. And I will be quick to say this to you. If anybody expects the pump price of petrol to return to 500, 400 naira per liter, forget it. That era is gone. And why do I say that? 90% of what you and I pay at the pump head for refined petroleum products, we call them white products, is driven by the cost of the feedstock. And that is the crude oil. So the rest is a matter of logistics and the government taxes and duties. So now it means then that if you have arrived at a new equilibrium, the only gain you may expect is a little dip, unless the price of crude oil goes back to where it was in 1999, when President Obasanjo came into office. We're looking then at about $10 per barrel. Okay? So now, what are those changes? And they are quite, I summarize them in this slide. We know them already, so we are not going to discuss them. Just to mention in passing. We've seen first subsidy removal, which I just spoke to. We've seen unified exchange rates, which of course, basically in economics we say is devaluation. Now when it happened, I didn't like it. Because over the years, I've always argued that the economics of deregulation is to make your export more attractive because you get cheaper. So, and then I said, let's look at the external sector of the Nigerian economy. What do we export? 90.1% of our merchandise export is hydrocarbons. That is crude oil, condensate, and associated gas. Which means the window that we have for taking advantage of devaluation is just 10% of our external trade. But at the same time, when you look at the shenanigans within the FX market, that we also advise that we needed to take a very firm and tough decision in order to set that market right. We've been working on that. And of course, the latest was what happened 2 days ago. That was on Tuesday with the launch of the FX code. The idea is to do two things. Bring efficiency and transparency into the market, and then secondly, bring effectiveness. The first part of efficiency came with the, electronic foreign exchange matching system, FMs. That brought efficiency and transparency. Now, the second part is to do with effectiveness. That means right behavior of authorized dealers. And that was the one that was launched 2 days ago at the FX Code. Now, when you look at that, it's bringing some measure of not only price discovery, but those who drive the price itself also maintain right behavior so that we can now develop confidence in whatever the outcome of market interactions is. Of course, fiscal consolidation, we've seen the effect of that on the federation account, and how much goes to the 3 tiers of the government. Tax reforms, for me, is the game changer for Nigeria. And why do I say that? 2 things. I will circle back to 2010, when I was appointed among 23 Nigerians into a presidential committee to look at federal government expenditure. And then look historically from independence till date. And then look also across the entire world. Has there been any country that was in the same kind of situation Nigeria was at that time? We haven't fully exited that anyway. Where what you earn from the export of hydrocarbons determines what happens to your fiscal operations. Anytime the price of crude oil went up, we made a lot of money. But unfortunately, we also will get careless and spend carelessly, like a drunken sailor. Anytime the price of crude oil went down, inflows, reduced significantly, and then we say, let's tighten our belts. For those who will remember, I record this particular cartoon in the Daily Times of yore by Josiah Jiboye, when Obasanjo was our military head of state, and then introduced austerity measures. And he drew that cartoon, in military uniform, and then his tummy bulging, and then the belt was under the tummy, and Josiah Jiboye wrote there, the belt should come on top of the tummy so that it can go inside. So I still remember vividly that cartoon, all right? That was in the late 70s. Now, for me, therefore, when it comes to tax reforms, and this is the issue for us, we not only look at ourselves, we look at other geographies, especially in Africa, Kenya and South Africa. Payee in Kenya, smaller in terms of population. Payee in South Africa, smaller than Nigeria in population, is multiples of what you collect in Nigeria. If you also go to CIT, that's corporate income tax, the same story. So it means that there's something wrong with our tax basket. Either it is small, because we don't have enough people inside it. When you look at taxpayers registered, and look at the population of adults, let me say adults, and then look at registered businesses, it will be obvious straight away that there's a lot of leakages. Now, beyond that also, some are in the basket already, but whatever they are paying is not totally getting into the purse. So the reforms in that space then is about, let's simplify the taxation system, make it simple, easy to understand, and easy to pay. So if we do that also, let's now apply technology. If we can apply technology, for example, to identify you as having a NIN, and we therefore can identify you as a Nigerian who resides here, earns money here. You also sit on the board of a company as a director. Your NIN is also on the bank account of that particular entity. Then we should be able to use that as a platform for now connecting them all. I was privileged to write the business plan for the National ID card in 2008. What I had in mind when I wrote it was for a National ID card to become the basic data that we use to drive growth of the economy. In fact, the projection was that by year 2022, we should have over 100 adults already on that platform, the database. So if you are on the database, that means number one, in terms of tax and in terms of access to public services, it will be easy to know who is who. But not only that, something played out, I think that was in 2012. I was invited again by NMIC, and they said, how can we commercialize this national ID card? And then we came up with the concept that let's design it in a way that ultimately your national ID card will become your international passport. The national ID card will become your driver's license. So if you now go to any consular office to apply for visa, to visit, let's say, United Kingdom, all you will need to take is your national ID card. Once you are uniquely identified with your name, any data on you existing anywhere in Nigeria, they can see it on the screen. Because we designed it to link everything in Nigeria. That's the way the portal was designed. So in which case, you can practically use data to grow this economy. I have a few remarks I'll make also on the digital economy and how it is evolving in Nigeria. A very huge area of opportunities. Let's progress. Now, we see NEL fund that applies to education. Children can take interest-free loans to fund their education. We see also consumer credit, which is coming up now. Excellent. So consumer credit is coming up now to recreate the middle class that was thinning and disappearing in Nigeria. And the economic argument is this. The upper class don't consume. They mostly invest. The middle class consumes. Those at the bottom of the pyramid, they lack the capacity anyway to consume. So what most economists do, if you are going to grow your economy through the consumption angle, then you need to empower the middle class. That is the essence of consumer credit. In which case, this particular one that the government has introduced means you have access to things that are manufactured in Nigeria. Yes, you can access the loan, single digit, no problem. But you can use this loan to buy anything household item, furniture, television, freezers, refrigerators, even phones, that's devices, and so on and so forth. Then cars. But only on one condition. Those items you want to buy with the loan from Credit Corp must be made in Nigeria. So that now connects credit to job creation. That's the concept. Now, I've been an advocate in that space of consumer credit since 2007, when Nigeria had the first policy on that, launched by President Obasanjo. In fact, in the lighter mode, that was my first visit to Aso Rock, 2007. It was to launch the Nigerian consumer credit, but which we never did anything about. Until now, the reform says, let's bring that idea back to life. And then we created an institution to drive it. Now, let me go beyond that. And now we've seen all these reforms. The beauty of reforms is when you continue with it until you see the tangible results and the impact. So you don't reverse reforms, otherwise your condition will be worse than before you began it. And so that is the message in this particular one, which I believe NBCC also we want to pass as an advocacy to the government. All right? Now, beyond this, let's now come home to the economy itself. What was the state of the economy? If you go to the dashboard, and of course I can speak to that, we see the connection between a number of things that our president also mentioned. Because he made reference to the rate of interest. Okay? Now I start there on the dashboard from the growth of the economy. Now the economy has been growing steadily. In fact, there's a chart I put in my deck that shows an upward trend in our growth rate in the last 12 years. It's been growing steadily. The trend line is upwards. But there's a peculiarity to our growth. We have been growing, but we are not growing inclusively. To grow inclusively means you are creating jobs. But instead of creating jobs, we are creating dollar millionaires. In fact, there was a publication in January 2014 that identified Nigeria and 3 other countries that were creating dollar millionaires instead of jobs. And they were growing very well. So they were given the acronym MINT. And that was from the first letters of their names. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Okay, that was the acronym around that. So the challenge we face today is how do we grow this economy in an inclusive manner? But there are 2 other things we also see. Grow it also in a sustainable manner and in a sustained manner. So if, therefore, we are going to get benefit from this, that should be the direction. If you notice also, our GDP has been driven mostly by services, which accounted for between 53 and 54% of our GDP. Services don't create jobs. More jobs are created in factories, primarily. That's why I started from talking about manufacturing deficit. But if you want to also strengthen manufacturing, basically, as I said earlier on, you need infrastructure that supports that. I served briefly as an advisor to the president in 2011. And when it came to talking about infrastructure, what we did then was to map infrastructure throughout Nigeria, the requirements. But we said, let's break the country into 12 clusters of economic activities. So infrastructure then will be marked to the kind of economic activity taking place in each cluster. All right? In fact, for that, I was branded Mr. Cluster in 2011 in President Jonathan's cabinet. Because I said, if you're an advisor like me, or you are a minister in this cabinet, I will not recommend a road to be constructed to your village because you are a minister or advisor. But if I see that road as going to support economic activities in your village, then it will be in what you put on the table before the president. We did that throughout Nigeria, and then we now created a platform for the president to sit every quarter with top business people and then invite them. Which one do you want to take under PPP? And that is the key thing here. The government cannot deliver the infrastructure required. Their job is to provide an enabling environment for private capital to come in there and develop it. So that is the key thing I want to take out of that. So if this economy is going to grow faster and inclusively, then we need growth support infrastructure, but focus more on manufacturing. That also will require that we also recalibrate our commercial policy. In which case, if there's something we want to encourage is manufacturing here in Nigeria, then we should discourage its importation. Raise the import duty on that finished product, and then reduce the duty maybe even to zero on the inputs for that particular item. If you do that, then we can produce here in Nigeria. Coming back to the reference made to Dangote refinery. Now, when it was conceived, the idea was that we have more than Nigeria requires. Now, there's an aspect in that particular area I won't talk about publicly because I mentioned that somewhere at the public speech and I got a warning. I won't tell you where the warning came from, but it's simply to just make reference to something that has turned out to be a fraud. In the last 32 years, I've been involved in that conversation. And that fraud happens every day. But they put it as data before us. But when we interpret the data, we don't interpret it as a fraud. Okay? So, but the challenge here is that, yes, we have modular refineries in operation. We have Dangote refinery. Port Harcourt has come up with 60,000, barrels per day plate. And of course, we have others. Bois is also in the process and a couple of other modular refineries. But basically, what this will do is to increase the volume that we produce locally. And if we produce enough, that will take something out of the FX market. The demand for dollar to fund 39.1% of refined products we have been importing. So in which case, it will have an impact on the dollar demand. Unfortunately, we have not also managed it that way. That was the expectation we had, like the president said. But if we don't supply crude locally to those entities, they will still need to go to look for dollars to import crude. Which Dangote refinery just did. Somebody asked me 2 days ago at an event like this and said, well, with Trump 2.0, Nigeria's export to US will reduce. I said, who told you that? The man even made noise about crude. I said, no. Nigeria doesn't sell crude to the US. We buy crude from them, which we see what is happening with Dangote refinery. We buy from them. We don't sell to them. So in which case, if we are going to change that narrative, then policy must be treated in such a way that supports domestic refining and also domestic manufacturing. So let me move on from there. I'll talk about interest rates and then exchange rate, and I will summarize. Now, when it comes to interest rate, the new management of CBN came into office and said, we are going to move away from the mission drift that we observed in the previous management and focus primarily on the mandate of a central or reserve bank, and that is inflation targeting. And so looking at inflation, like our president said earlier on, at 34.8% end of the year, the beginning of 2024, we were above 20%, okay? So the CBN management came here and said, inflation targeting. And then they began from February 2024 to raise the monetary policy rate. In all, throughout 2024, there was 850 basis points increase in MPR. The argument was fight inflation. But we also mentioned to them that data that we interrogated from 1960 till date shows clearly that movements in the official, that is monetary policy rate, and movements in inflation rate have only co-varied to the extent of 37%, which means inflation in Nigeria is not fully explained by changes in interest rates. So it is basically structural, but largely also driven by food inflation. So and then we said, if Nigeria is going to break the back of inflation, then we need to focus on food security. It has 4 items, but especially the first 2, availability of food and then affordability of food. Those are the first 2 elements of food security. So if we focus on that, then we can deal with inflation, because food inflation will subside and that will feed into the headline inflation. But how do we do that in an environment where 60% of harvest goes to loss? That's the estimate of post-harvest losses in Nigeria, about 60%. So that means we need to either create an environment for private capital to come into processing and storage, and then logistics. But of course, like President said earlier, security is also important, which we warned the government about in 2017. That if we did not address the issue of the herders and farmers clash, as the government then called it, that we are playing with food inflation, which of course is our reality today. Because I made it very simple. I said, look, those fellows should be labeled as terrorists. And the simple way it interprets is this. A terrorist is anyone that makes you afraid to go to where you normally work and get your means of livelihood. So whoever makes you afraid to go there and do your normal, business is a terrorist. I said, so if we look at it from that perspective, then the full weight of dealing with terrorists will be applied to those headers. But of course, he said, no, it's headers farmers class. Okay, fine. But my warning then, January 2017, is that in a matter of 5 years, Nigeria will be dealing with food inflation that we had never seen before. And that's our reality today. So we'll deal with that. Then happily also, one of the areas this current government is working on, we have made noise about it for years, that Nigeria should also transit from rain-fed farming to year-round farming. That means irrigation. Irrigation in Nigeria historically was on the back of the river basin authorities, which have now been revived by this government. So, and we said, yes, they are going in the right direction. That means they are listening. They've also accepted that they are not experts. Because the problem with experts is that experts believe they know it all. So they listen to their teachers and other people to become experts. Now, once they become experts, they don't want to listen to anybody again. All right? So what we do is not to keep quiet about that. So now, NPR at 27.5% end of the year. You know what that did? It made Naira assets attractive to investors, local and foreign. So that drove FPIs. So what we see therefore in our external results that we closed the year with at $42 billion was likely driven by the NPR that went up. If you dimension the inflows in capital importation, you see that largely it's accounted for by investments in treasury bills, investments in FGM bonds, and of course, then the stock market. All right? Our stock market also has done fantastically well. If you look at, in fact, the way I put it is this, that we should also look at that sector for opportunities to create wealth. And why is that so? When you look at that market in the last 3 years, the return on that market, that is year-to-date return to the end of the year, had always been greater than the rate of inflation. Even at 34.8, we closed 2024 with. The year-to-date return was 37.45% thereabout. And that was higher than the rate of inflation. So if your portfolio mimics the market, then you were at an advantage investing in our stock market. Now, the bottom line then is this, forming the outlook. Will the CBN reduce MPR in 2025? They will do it symbolically. It won't be anything significant. And the reason is because if they make any major reduction in MPR, then those FPIs will troop out. And then we see our foreign reserves dampen significantly. And that will trigger another problem for the Naira. Now, the other side to it is the fact that crude oil, happily also for Nigeria, we have increased our daily production of crude oil, which has now given us some space for accretion to reserve. We didn't have that before this government came in, because a lot of what we were producing had been pledged upfront for certain foreign loans we took. So the only window for Nigeria was to increase our production of crude oil. And that is happening steadily right now. So it's creating also accretion to reserve. So coming therefore to what do we expect this year with respect to interest rates? We expect MPR to drop a little, not significantly, because CBN still wants to protect the inflows into foreign reserves. And then how will that work out with interest rates, lending rates by the banks? Lending rates will also drop, and we project that maybe to around 30% from what we see currently at 36, 37, and almost 40% in some of our banks. So it will drop, but not significantly. Mr. President talked about inflation rate. All right. We have a projection that inflation rate will drop to about 24% thereabout. It's our own projection in BA Console. It's in my deck. We see it there. And what is the reason for that? Number one is that we expect an improvement with what government is doing now in dealing with food inflation, which is the major driver of the headline inflation in Nigeria. So if that drops, then we expect it to also affect, the headline inflation and make it better. It won't go all the way down. But the other side to it is that we are rebasing the inflation rate, which means if we now adopt a base year that is more recent, then we probably see what Mr. President said. Governor Tinubu said he's expecting inflation to be at 15% this year. So if we rebase truly, we may move within that range. In which case, we may see inflation rate half because of that. Then rebasing GDP also, which of course is recommended by the multilateral agencies and development partners that should do that every 5 years. Now, this is like 10 years after, all right? When you rebase GDP, it's just to recognize the fact that if you take a look at me today, and for those who saw me 5 years ago, and those who saw me 10 years ago, even if you want to make me feel good and tell me that I've not changed, I know that I've changed. All right? And I can give you only one. I exercise every day. But I don't exercise at the same intensity I did 5 years ago. Because you can't run away from the place of age on your body. The same way with economics. Now, I will give only one so that I can wrap up. Okay? And that is agriculture. Agriculture has been the largest contributor to our GDP over the decades. When we rebased in 2014, taking the base year to 2010, agricultural share of GDP dropped from 33% to about 22%. All right? But we now also looked at that today and found that crop production as a subsector of agriculture had accounted for between 17 and now around 20% in the latest data for third quarter of 2024. In which case, we had recommended that it should pull out crop production and separate it from other agricultural activities so that I can have an idea of what is happening there. Now, the chamber also expects me to talk about digitization. Now, Nigeria is rapidly digitizing, not only the population, but in economic activities. Yes, a projection about $18.6 billion revenue from the digital economy in 2026, but I will give you what is driving that. Number one is our population. Large, as I said earlier on, number 6 in the world, but youthful. Median age, 19.2 years. Very young population. But not only that, that young population is techy. All right? And this is the way I describe it. In our own generation, we refer to ourselves as digital migrants. But the generation of our children, we call them digital natives. So why some of us will be looking for manuals, for gadgets? They don't work with manuals. They just pick up devices and start running through them. But the bottom line is that, and I'll give you this as an illustration. I went to do some strategy work in Ghana 3 years ago. Now it's going to 4 years now, October 2021. One of the oldest companies in Ghana, Enterprise Group. They began operations in 1924. After our first session, the group head of HR said, from what I heard, it appears your company also is in HR. I said, yes. Now, we just had a group head of IT resign. He gave us 6 months notice. We gave mandate to KPMG to recruit a replacement. But maybe when KPMG brings the report, we send it to your firm to look at it and shortlist from that list 3 candidates. I said, okay, fine, no problem. He said, pro bono. I said, no problem. I said, what exactly is the requirement? And that's the connection to our conversation here. They said the requirement is the person must either be an Indian or a Nigerian. Remember I said Ghanaian entity in operation since 1924. Wanted to replace their group head of IT with either a Nigerian or an Indian. So I asked, why India or Nigerian? They said when it comes to IT competency in human beings, India is number 1. Nigeria is number 2 by their estimate. This was in October 2021. So, and when you now look at the data, tele-density, look at access to internet, in which we are number 11 in the world. You look at adults with access to internet, 84% of our adults have access to internet on their devices. And that puts us at number 7 in the world. Not in Africa, in the world. And so, everybody is interested in coming to the digital space in Nigeria. But what I also tell people is this. If your company or yourself has no identity on the digital space, you don't exist in the world we are in now. So if I put your name on a search engine and I press enter and nothing comes up, you don't exist. All right? The same goes with your company. Your company must have a digital footprint. Okay, I've seen inquiries from Japan, from Switzerland, and so many other countries that wanted our company to help them obtain license to own a microfinance bank in Nigeria. And once they get the license, we turn it to fintech. This is true life story. From Switzerland, a technology company. In fact, the one from Japan was referred to us by their embassy. Because their embassy has said, we know BA Cons, of course, we've done some work with the Japanese government over the years. So, but they came here to get a license to begin to play in the digital space in Nigeria. Think about it, the population. Population is advantage. If anybody tells you population is a burden, tell them no. Take a look at China. Take a look at India. The more of them you can bring from below poverty line to above it, the more power and muscle the economy develops. That's why today we see what is happening with the Chinese economy. In PPP terms, China is bigger than the US. If you calculate GDP by PPP, China's economy is bigger. And that's why you see the kind of things China is doing everywhere. Electric vehicles. China is number 1. Everybody is fighting them. So let me conclude this way. The outlook for this year for Nigeria, from my own perspective and what we have done in our firm, is positive. And I've heard the same thing said by many others who have done a similar outlook, those foreign and those that are local. But the line I will draw for you is this. Within that environment that there are many opportunities, diverse, every sector, okay, aim to grow at a rate faster than the economy. And this is the way you measure it if you want to really drive your business this year. And I will use last year to illustrate. We project this year the economy will grow by 4.12. CBN came out last week and said 4.17. All right? Of course, NSG has a more aggressive expectation in terms of exchange rate, 1,300. Budget this year, 1.4. Mr. President said 1.5. Okay? Our firm, we project 1.564. But our own is based on the fact that we expect the economy to grow. There's no how you grow this economy, there will be some measure of pressure in the FS market. Because there will be a demand for import of inputs and raw material for some manufacturers. So that will bring some measure of pressure in that particular space. But when you take it all together, what we expect is that Naira will still remain fairly stable. That's the expectation. And of course, that again is looking at the various factors. There are about 12 of them. but I won't go into detail because of time, that drive changes in exchange rate. And of course, I've talked about the interest rate and also inflation rate. So it's an environment that we see will be more conducive to business than we had in 2024 or 2023. So it's a better environment. And so the way you should look at it is this. If you take what your company generated in 2023, divide that by the exchange rate at the end of that year, that will give you the dollar amount you generated. Then look at what you generated in 2024. Convert also using the exchange value of the naira to the dollar. It gives you the dollar amount you generated. Now, the growth rate in your dollar income is what you compare to the GDP growth rate of Nigeria. If you do it that way, and you target to grow faster than the GDP growth rate in Nigeria, you'll be on a very safe ground. So the essence, therefore, is when you are pursuing your growth strategy, you are taking into account the exchange value of the naira, and at the same time, driving your business to actually grow faster than the economy. So I will leave it there because there are other panelists here who will flesh this up and bring other perspectives. Thank you so very much. And
that applause is not enough. In introducing Professor Adedipe, when I said he transitioned from being an academic to an operator in investment banking and commercial banking and into consulting, you thought I was blabbing. Another round of applause for Professor Adedipe. He said a few things. If I wrote your name on a search engine and nothing came out, you do not exist. If I wrote the name of your company on Google search engine and nothing came up, you are not in existence. I saw that my friend and brother, the GMD of NGX, smiled very excitedly when Prof said something about the capital market and the growth in that market, and that market being an area of play for every one of us. The NGX, one of our principal partners at the chamber, I've not been paid to say this. It's pro bono. But the GMD of NGX is seated right on the table of Mr. President, Mr. Jude Chiemeka. May we give him a round of applause. I also saw that one of our panelists, Dr. Onodeko, nodded in agreement when those positive comments were said about agriculture. He's one of the panelists today. He's the CEO of Swaco Limited, a subsidiary of Odua Investment Limited focused on the agricultural sector. So all the bullets you are going to take will be at the Q&A session on the panel discussion. You're going to tell us how what Prof said is going to transition or transmit into real revenue for your company and individuals. So my next task is to introduce an advert. But before playing it, tomorrow is January 31, 2025. If you hadn't filed returns for taxes for your employees, you had better do so. There's a legal implication of not filing returns for taxes. Now, LRS didn't pay me for this, but I just think it should be an add-on for them. File your tax returns tomorrow, else there are penalties. Then we have the...
I'm so sorry, sir. Let me share my screen. And that is the end of my presentation.
What about our company annual returns tax filing?
Planning the new year for your company is intentional. So should your tax filing. To all employers of labor in Lagos State, take notice: failure to file your company's annual tax returns on or before 31st January 2025 is a contravention of the extant provisions of the Personal Income Tax Act 2004 as amended, which attracts stiff penalties on defaulters. Please note that employee taxpayer ID is required for the annual returns and 2025 projection returns. This message is brought to you by the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, LIRS.
Sponsors, Lagos Internal Revenue Service. Nobody wants to pay taxes, but we need taxes for development. So we are going into the meat of the discussion, which is a panel. Because of time, I'm going to just spend only a paragraph to introduce our panelists. And they're all CEOs of different sectors of the economy. I'll start with our own, Zenith Carex International, one of us, a former sponsor of events at the Chamber and also a member of the Chamber. Dr. Olamilekon Adelano, CEO of Zenith Carex International. Dr. Olamilekon Adelano is the managing director and CEO of Zenith Carex International. He was born, I'll skip it. I won't tell people your age. It was put here, the date and everywhere, but I won't say. He brings many years of cognate experience in logistics and transportation, playing a pivotal role in the company's growth and success. Dr. Adelano's leadership and expertise have earned him recognition in the country with sundry awards, both locally and internationally. He is recognized for his professional standing on ethics and compliance by the Governing Council of Ethics and Compliance of Association, ECOA. Lekon is also a consultative committee member of the Universal Postal Union under United Nations. Additionally, Dr. Adelano has been honored with the Professional Excellence Certification Award of Doctor of Business Administration, that's DBA, in Business and Strategic Management at the Maverick Business Academy, London. May I invite Dr. Adelano to take his seat as a panelist. Another round of applause. His company is one of our major sponsors across different events at the Chamber. Dr. Adelano, you pay me for not disclosing your age because it was written here, your date of birth. The next CEO to be recognized is my friend again, Dr. Theophilus Adewale Onodeko, FCIB, a fellow former banker like myself. He's the MD of SWACO Limited, subsidiary, the agricultural subsidiary of Odua Investment Limited. Dr. Onodeko is an experienced finance and agribusiness executive, chartered banker, and trained agricultural and development economist with over 25 years of experience across corporate strategy, impact investing, SME banking, agribusiness value chain, financial technology, and management consulting. He's presently the Managing Director, Chief Executive of Southwest Agricultural Company Limited, SWACO. He previously worked with the IFC, International Finance Corporation, the financial sector, Deepening Africa, FSDA, German Development Corporation, GIZ, Halifax Bank of Scotland, UK. So he jackpot for a while before he jackpot back. AXA Financial Services in the United Kingdom, United Bank for Africa, UBA, NISOL, Nigeria Incentive-Based Risk Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, and ARM, and eventually the Dual Group. While he received a PhD in Agricultural Economics and Environmental Policy from the World Bank of Africa Center of Excellence in Agricultural Development and Sustainable Environment, CEADESE, Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, FUNAB. He has an MBA in Finance from Manchester Business School, a very illustrious school, but the football club in that city is underperforming. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria and certified associate in project management from George Washington University of Business in the United States. I have the honor to invite to the podium my brother and my friend, a fellow banker that I've known for so many years, Theophilus Adewale Onodeko, PhD. Third, there's another CEO who has, won so many caps. He's oscillated between being the MD of Abuja Disco to being the MD of Transcorp Power, now to being the MD of Transcorp Energy Limited. A round of applause for Chris before I even read his profile. Christopher Iziafulukwe is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Transcorp Energy Limited, the energy subsidiary of Nigeria's leading diversified conglomerate, Transnational Corporation, PLC Transcorp. An accomplished legal and energy expert, Christopher is a transformational leader. He's probably served as the Managing Director of Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, following the acquisition of 60% equity in AEDC by Transcorp. I'll skip a lot of details. I'll I'll just go to the last paragraph. A dual LMD holder with master's degree in energy, environmental and natural resources law from the University of Houston, Texas, and the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Chris is an alumnus of the Lagos Business School. We are wired that way. LBS alumni were that way. So I wasn't surprised. Chris is an alumnus of LBS and ISC Business School, Barcelona, and a member of professional bodies such as Association of International Petroleum Negotiators, AIPN, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, Nigerian Bar Association, and others. Christopher is passionate about achieving self-sustaining electricity market, incorporating hybrid solutions, knowing very well the catalytic impact it would have on the Nigerian economy. Chris is also a director of Transcorp Power PLC and Trans-Afam Power PLC, Power Limited. A round of applause to Christopher Eziafulukwe. Now, the final panelist is someone who has promised that was going to give us free SIM card without charges for the next 1 year after this panel discussion. If you believe that, you will believe anything. My brother, a prince from my home state, Mr. Obafemi Banigbe, is the MD CEO of Nine Mobile. Femi is an accomplished technology business leader, entrepreneur, and influential figure with a proven track record of steering technological innovations and strategic initiatives throughout various pivotal markets across Africa. Femi is the Chief Executive Officer at Emerging Markets Telecommunications Services, EMTS, trading as Nine Mobile. He was previously a senior partner in charge of strategy, technology, and operations with African contexts as advisory partners in Nigeria. Femi was the immediate past managing partner and co-founder at Silver Rock Technology Services in Ghana, a strategic advisory firm specializing in the telecom, media, and technology sectors. Aside from his advisory practices, Obafemi has a pioneering role as a president and co-founder of TV Anywhere Africa, a media consultancy technology firm. I'll skip a lot of details to you and go to the final one. In terms of education, Obafemi Banigbe holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Electrical and Computer Engineering from the Federal University of Technology, Mina, FUT Mina in Nigeria. He augmented his expertise through the Ericsson Management Development Program, the Advanced Management Program at the London Business School, which culminated in his academic journey with an MBA from Manchester Business School. Again, Manchester Business School. Do something about Manchester United. I have the honor to invite to the podium Obafemi Banigbe, the CEO of Nine Mobile. If you look at the sizes of these CEOs, you might not be able to say so much, but if you see their cash flow statement and their bank statement, you will shout. I hope I'm not giving anything away. Sensitive. Chris said that information was sensitive. Price sensitive. Okay, that's true. And the NGX CEO is here with us. Now, I have the honor to invite Mr. Bosin Omofai. I won't read Mr. Omofai's profile. He's so well known. He actually flew in from Tanzania after covering the African Leaders Summit on Energy just a few days ago. He flew in back yesterday. Mr. Bosin Omofai is a well-known face in the media, and he's going to do his job as a moderator. Mr. Omofai, please.
Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for my boss. And may I stand on all existing protocols and invite Dr. Adidipe, please, to the podium to be a member of the panel. Thank you very much. Please, your hands together for Dr. Adidipe. I think time is fast spent, ladies and gentlemen. And Dr. Adidipe laid a lot of background for us to have a very enlightening panel. But I would like to say a few things just to get us started. I'm sure we're all aware of the crisis ongoing in East and Central Africa, DRC to be precise. And the meeting of the SADC region, which is the Southern African Development Communities, presidents took place yesterday, and part of it is still being held today. If you're on the Twitter handle of President Paul Kagame this morning, and this was part of what he told other presidents because of the crisis in DRC and how to resolve it. I'll read only the first paragraph. Mr. Chairman, that's the chairman of the SADC community. Your Excellencies, I want us that for whatever we are saying and whatever we intend to do, we capture the context rightly and then proceed based on that, and maybe we can get somewhere. Otherwise, if we keep saying good things to each other, being nice, and then each one fulfilling their own interest other than the common interest we have as East Africans, then I don't see how we are going to contribute effectively to finding a solution. End of quote. I want us to be nice in this conversation, but I want us to say things rightly the way they should. Please, let's give Mr. President, our president of NBCC, a round of applause for your opening comments. I brought you, let me put it this way. A lot was said at the African Heads of State Energy Summit, and I want us to start this panel from the field of energy. Because whether it is fintech, whether it is AI, whether it is logistics, whether it is agriculture or agro-allied, we will achieve very little if we don't have energy. You can't create jobs without energy. That's basically anything, nothing that we can achieve. The problem of Africa with migration is also about energy. Folks were migrating because they're simply frustrated with the fact that there's lack of energy. I don't know about today, but years ago, the Nigerian Stock Exchange was running on about 6 different diesel generators because the trading engine must not stop for a second, whether there's a public holiday or not. And the trucks of diesel coming there every day that I saw as a journalist for 32 years, it's mind-boggling. So I'm going to start with you. Oh, by the way, yesterday, Burkina Faso announced or they unveiled the country's first electric vehicle. And that's Burkina Faso. You're trying to find where it is on the map of Africa? Try and Google that. Now, there are 3 countries in Africa that are leading electric vehicles, and Burkina Faso just joined them. By the way, they just had the military approach the civilian government a few months ago, right? Just about a year or so ago. Now they have an electric vehicle. Kenya, South Africa, I can't remember the 3rd country. Now, Burkina Faso, ruled by military junta, has an electric vehicle next door to us. Oh, by the way, this morning, they also announced a new passport for the 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So if any one of us is thinking of going there, go online and visit the embassy to know what the visa requirements will be. So we have a lot of work to do. Oh, by the way, I forgot. The president of Burkina Faso also, a few days ago, today's Thursday, right? Bought 2 brand new aircraft for the country's airline. He didn't buy personal jets for the president himself. He bought 2 new, and you can check it online, or if you follow the news, you find it. 2 new aircrafts. And that's the country just, whatever you can say. So why do I lay this background? It's the fact that we may have the size and whatsoever. If we're not moving with the speed of light, in whatever we are doing, the IMF has placed Côte d'Ivoire now as the leading engine of growth for West African economies and no longer Nigeria. And that is official. And you can read that up on the IMF Twitter handle, or X, by the way. So we have a lot to do. So let me start with you, my good brother at Transcorp Energy. And the question is, how do we resolve this main issue that affects everyone in the room? Because the problem is from birth to death in Nigeria. The generator to run even the mortuaries. That's quite so disgusting and disappointing that even the dead can't have electricity. We have to use diesel or petrol to power them. I'm sorry, I don't want to scare those of us who are the... but that's the truth. So how do we resolve the issue around electricity? Let me go straight to the question. Let me read it out in black and white. What strategies or are we addressing challenges of energy infrastructure such as grid reliability and pipeline vandalism to ensure a stable energy supply? Chris.
Boston, thanks. Let me start by saying that at the point that the panelists were being announced, and having listened to the president, as well as the guest speaker, I obviously knew that the bulk of the conversation, if we're to be realistic, right, would focus on energy. Second thing to put out is just to remind us that we are dealing with the impact of years of not doing the right thing. It's very important, right? The third thing is that the energy sector operates in the economy that the guest speaker has spoken so much about. So when you put this together, your earlier question, which you aborted halfway, is even wider in scope than the one you read out, which is how do we fix energy, and this time around specifically electricity in Nigeria? My first answer is one, in the doing. And what do I mean by that? Execution. Listening to the guest lecturer, you understand. We had them say policies, plans that were submitted as far back as in the 70s. So what happened? Why are we still talking about them today? So execution, doing, the discipline or the act of doing, getting things done. And that is why for us in Transcorp Group, we have 3 core values: enterprise, execution, and excellence. Because we can say all, we can, and in speaking to execution, right, I don't want us to look at, long distance. For instance, we can start with reliability. That's key. Today, even the capacity we have, how do we make it reliable? Before you start talking of expanding, they can also go hand in hand. But reliability should be a low-hanging fruit. How do we make this capacity that we have to do on the national grid? The best is 5,800 megawatts. 5.8 gigawatts, if you want to hear gigawatts, right? That's the best in terms of power that have been made available for 200, and you told us, the guest lecturer told us, 235 million today. So to make it reliable, right, we need to confront frontally those key infrastructure issues. That's to make what we have today reliable.
Reliable to the extent, may I respectfully cut in, with what President Additional said, it's not how much megawatts you produce, but how much megawatts you deliver.
Exactly.
To the last mile. Is that what you...
And you deliver reliably.
So are we delivering 5,000, 6,000 megawatts? Are we? To the last mile?
As at today, no. That's what I'm saying. That is a peak, right? The best performance, a kind of one-off thing that we've had on the national grid. On the average, we get between 3,800 and 4,200 today. Right? But I'm even saying, how do we make that? How can you even be able to plan with that? That's the reliability. You plan, you know that, okay, even if my power is going to be rationed, I will have power between this time and this time. Okay? And then we'll begin to talk about expansion. So infrastructure and our approach to it must change.
Okay.
Right?
Now, if you permit me to cut in there respectfully, and this is how we go. I want other panelists to also react to the issue of energy.
Yes.
By the way, Nigeria has a new energy program, which was announced a few days ago in Dar es Salaam. And it's a $32.7 billion program. The government plans to bring $15.5 billion to the table. The private sector, whether local and foreign, will bring about $12 billion, a total of 32.7. Now, the new energy compact, which Mr. President signed on, and a beautiful presentation to this behind closed door session, had a whole lot transformation in the power sector coming over the next 5 years. That was under the Mission 300 program. Nigeria is one of the 12 countries that unveiled that program in Dar es Salaam this week. So I love that. But I love the point that we've done a lot of talking over the past years, and we're very short on doing. So let me ask the man in logistics. One of the problems in logistics is electricity and power. And South Africa has had a very big brunt of that with Transnet Holdings over the past few years, that South Africa has suffered very greatly because Transnet was there to deliver, but there was no power to move those locomotives and whatever it is to get the mining products and finished goods to the seaports and all of that. So how much of energy impact, what would you like to see done differently in the energy sector to support logistics?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator. When it comes to business of logistics, it's a sector that supports all businesses in the world. Whether it's a banking sector, you need logistics to move your documents, to move your stationaries from one point to the other. Whether it's in agri, you need logistics, services, to do storage facility, to move your products from one point to the other. Whether in manufacturing sector, you will need us. During the era of COVID, it was very obvious that logistics is the only services that was available to meet the need of everyone. Energy plays a vital role when it comes to movement of goods, fueling our fleets from one point to another. The cost of energy actually affects the cost of logistics in terms of affordability. Good logistics entails efficiency and cost effectiveness. But when the cost of buying diesel from 200, 250 about 5 years ago is now about 1,000 plus, definitely cost of logistics has also rise to the point of, you have to consider whether you are going to start your own logistics to move your things, or you want to engage a logistic company to move your things. And not just energy, if you also look at our infrastructure, the decay on our road infrastructure is also a major factor. And meeting up with timely delivery because of insecurity, bad road infrastructure, also have an impact, a negative impact in the logistics sector. And to mention but a few. So energy plays a vital role, whether government is introducing CNG or they're introducing electric or diesel. Is a whole lot.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Another sector one other sector that's very key to what Dr. Adedekwe, a key speaker, spoke about is agriculture. And I think agriculture beyond farming. That's what we should be discussing here. Dr. Adedekwe, we need the smallholder farmers. But I've heard severally that we need to move beyond smallholder farmers and to move into large-scale farming that can help us do better in terms of food security, food sustainability. But we can't put food on the table. We can't refrigerate. We can hardly do anything we don't have electricity, which is power. So I want you to speak to me about what SWACO is doing and how much impact is lack of accessible, reliable, I don't want to go to affordable electricity before I get into, if Christopher will answer that affordable, I'm going to throw him under the bus for that, what the tariff should be for electricity. My friend here will do the one for telco and all that. Take it from me, please.
All right. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the organizers of the NBCC for the platform that I have to represent SWACO. SWACO is the agri-investment vehicle of the Odua Group, and we position as an investment company, raising capital and finding where to deploy, those capital within the agribusiness value chain. Let me start from the idea of smallholder farmers, and then I'll circle back on the energy question. I need us to realize that today, smallholders, they contribute about 80% of what we eat. They've done a lot, but they won't take us to where we are supposed to go. If you are thinking agro-industrialization, if you are thinking food security, smallholders are not going to take us there. And I can draw parallel from what Professor Adedekwe said earlier. If you look at developed economies, so today agri contributes, as of last GDP numbers, agri contributed about 29% to GDP. And we get excited because, it looks like as if agri is contributing a lot. But if we really want to get to where the developed economies are, US, UK is less than 1% of agri to GDP. Canada is about 7%. If you come to the BRICS, your South Africa and China, less than 4%. If you get India, about 18%. What am I trying to say? Nigeria is 29%. The more we want to get into being a developed economy, that number has to reduce, the contribution of agri to GDP. That's the foundation I'm laying. But what is going to drive the solid production that is like a value chain approach is what we are leading at the Odua Group, and we call it agro-industrial hubs. Basically, that's our strategy. We believe that the smallholder system should exist, but on top of that, we are creating a parallel system where across different locations, we bring all the players together, everybody on this table. I bring logistics to a hub. I bring independent power to a hub. I bring mechanization to a hub. I bring all the infrastructure. So from seed, from planting, from processing, from storage and logistics. And that is the direction we need to go. We need to do more and more of that. We need to stay consistent on developing agro-industrial hubs, because that is what is going to deliver the food that we need to be able to be self-sustaining. Dr. talk about the three crises, food crisis, energy, manufacturing, those deficits. We need to deal with it in order to move this country forward. But energy plays a major role. Today, we manage about 5 agri-hubs at different stages of capitalization. And I will tell you that at least 4 of those hubs are out of where your national grid will cover. And we are not going to depend on the national grid in order to power those places. It's going to be independent power projects like a CRIS. We get a CRIS interested in coming into this SPV and developing an independent power that can supply power to everybody within that ecosystem.
Have you guys had a conversation already?
I haven't spoken with Chris, and maybe I will go after this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. President, NBCC, for making this happen. Yeah, please. That's exactly why I'm. Please ask. Yeah, there's a finder's fee. And give me a little cut, too, for bringing the question. But go ahead. Let's have the conversation.
So the summary is we need all those players, because the way we structure it is a big holding SPV that then has the different players playing sub within that SPV. So there's a power play, there is the land development mechanization play, there is the housing play, and then you have your bread and butter, seed, producer, processor, and all of that, all existing within an ecosystem. That is the direction that Nigeria needs to go, and that is a strategy we are leading as well.
Thank you. Just a quick one before you drop the mic. The EFDB and Nigerian government working together for these special agri-processing zones, the SAPZ, it's about $20 billion, some money already on the table with other development partners across 22 states of the Federation. Is that project moving on? How much do you know on the ground? Would that be a key solution to our agro-allied issue? Would that help us?
So on paper, it's a key solution. I've been following this whole SAPZ program since my days at IFC, 2011, 2012. What we haven't seen is traction. The problem is always around execution. So it's fantastic. The first one in Ogun State is sort of leading. Execution in phase 1 is sort of very little. And then they've launched phase 2. So I'm wondering, why, on which basis did you launch phase 2 if you haven't really executed 10% of phase 1? So it's laudable on paper, but I think the problem is always execution. And I think that we need regional players like Iswako across Nigeria who can take on more a private sector approach to it and allow the government to just create the enabling environment so that we can bring it to life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Get the government out of the way, let the private sector do the job. Let's bring technology into it, and that's very important for Nine Mobile. In terms of digital adoption, digital technologies, and what challenges and opportunities are there for businesses in Nigeria, even though the services sector will not really give us everything that we need, but at least we need you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this panel. First, I want to start by saying that the telecom industry in Nigeria has a lot of opportunity for growth, especially as the population of Nigeria grows and as digital penetration of digital services also improves. One of the biggest drivers of digital services is the smartphone penetration. And we're beginning to see, I would say, an upward trajectory in the increase of smartphone penetration, which is now sitting at around 50%. So that means we still have around 50% of the telephone users in Nigeria that still do not have smartphones. So we have to be very, very mindful of that fact. Having said that, the industry is currently going through let me use the word, a difficult time, which is mostly driven by the increases in all the cost input that we face. Still talking about energy, one of the biggest drivers of the telecommunication cost structure is the cost of energy. the cost to power the base station, whether it's coming from the electricity companies or it's coming from the diesel powered generators. Those costs have skyrocketed thanks to band hay. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the concept of the band hay for what we pay for in terms of what we get from the distribution companies. But most importantly is really what we pay in terms of diesel. All of us know today that the diesel costs have grown from what it used to be around less than 200 naira. Now we're talking about 1,200. Just to give an example, the telecom industry consumes around 40 million liters of diesel every month. So at 40 million liters of diesel every month, if you were buying it at 200 naira before, and now you're now buying it at 1,200 naira, that is an astronomical increase in cost. Now, the reason why we're consuming 40 million liters of diesel every month actually is another conversation, because really any country that wants to develop has to move away from powering his site using diesel power generators to commercial power. So this is an opportunity for the electricity companies as well. I would say that one of the challenges in the electricity sector, even though I do not play in that sector, aside from generation, one of the biggest challenges is really the transmission and then the distribution. And then even though we are counting on the electricity company to support us in order to move away from diesel, then the electricity company also needs to fix their distribution infrastructure. Otherwise, the powers will not get to the base stations where we are in. The second major cost input has to do with the FX. 65 to around, depending on what kind of operation you run, about 75 to 80% of your capex cost is FX denominated. So your capital expenditure is 75% FX denominated. Then some of your operational costs are also FX denominated. So if you have a cost structure where the FX was pegged around 450, even though we know that's artificial, as it is, 450 or 400 naira to $1. Now you're now sitting at 1,600 or 1,700 naira to $1. That effectively means that your capex cost is going to increase astronomically as well. So those are the two existential crises that the telecom sector has found itself. So in an industry where the pricing regime is regulated, it will be unfair not to regulate the cost and then want to regulate the price. It just doesn't make any logical sense to do that. Now, when you look at even the custom duties that we pay, that's also gone up. So in terms of the opportunities in the Nigerian sector, I would say we need to first get the basics right in the telecom sector, and that is, can we create an environment where an industry can thrive, meaning that we can cover the cost of running the business and also cover the cost of, let me say, generating a decent return for the guys who are investing in the sector. Now, Nigerian economy has to move away from a subsidized economy to a market-driven economy. And that's what I think that's what the president is trying to do, or the government is trying to do. Of course, that will introduce a shock into the sector, into the system, because if you used to subsidize something and you no longer subsidize it, of course, the cost is going to reflect the true market price of the entire thing. So the telecom sector as well cannot be made to be subsidizing the population, because we're working based on private capital. So what will drive the growth in the telecom sector has to be based on, can we attract the right capital into the market? Now, so if you have $1,000 to invest, the question is, where will you invest $1,000? Are you going to invest $1,000 in the telecom sector that has generated negative returns in the last 2 years? Are you going to invest that $1,000 in a sector that has generated, say, 34% based on, if you index it from point of view of the Nigerian Stock Exchange? So if we are all fighting for the same investment capital from the capital market, whether it is from loans or from equity, the question is, the person who is giving you money is not Father Christmas. He's going to say, where do I get the best return for the investment I'm putting in? So if we are not going to deliver growth, then it means that we cannot attract investment. It also means that we cannot drive digitization of our sector. So in digitizing our sector, it means that we need to actually improve our infrastructure to become more digitally compliant. What do I mean by that? Most of digital infrastructure is now open infrastructure based on open API. It means that we don't need to upgrade our entire legacy infrastructure to reflect that the new trend, so which is what Nine Mobile is trying to do. Now, if you look at Nine Mobile, somebody will say, "Are we still existing?" Yes, we are still existing.
I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to give you a call right now.
We are still existing. And the challenge is essentially Nine Mobile has not been able to attract investment into its business in the last 9 years since Etisalat left. So if you don't invest in a business for 9 years, what do you expect? Infrastructure is going to be dilapidated. And why can't you invest? You can't invest simply because you are not generating returns that can attract the capital. So if you're attracting debt capital, debt means that you have to be able to pay back. So when you look at your debt coverage, debt service coverage ratio is negative. When you look at your ability to even attract more debt, you are over leveraged. So effectively means that what needs to get Nine Mobile up is equity investment. So now when you have to do equity investment, you also need to sort of rebalance your balance sheet. Otherwise, you're going to put equity in and then you have a lot of debt ratio. So you need to first restructure your balance sheet and then you attract equity that you can then invest in infrastructure. And then that effectively means that that's what we're doing. So in the last 6 months, we're basically trying to, move into a more digitally compliant infrastructure, meaning that you need to have more predictability from the FX side. We thank God that maybe FX is going to stabilize at about 1,500, hopefully this year. If you can have stability and you can price appropriately for your goods, then it means that you can then go to the market to say, if you give me $1 billion over a period of 3 years, I'm going to generate X percentage returns for you. Then if you match that returns against what you can generate in the capital market, then you say, okay, you guys, let me put my money in there so that I can diversify my portfolio. So that is how you drive the growth in the industry. Nigeria is going to be 400 million people in 25 years. It means that we need to rely more on digital infrastructure if we want to change the way we educate our kids, if we want to change the way we access healthcare, if we want to change the way we access all digital services. Digital is not only about social media, right? Because when I say it's digital, everybody is talking about social media or fintech. Now, there are edtech, there are health tech, there are media tech solutions, there are insure tech. Everything that can be delivered digitally is what we should be moving into talking about. When we're talking about those and delivering those, they require you to have different set of infrastructure and different kinds of way of operating. So this is what I see in the telecom sector.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Give me a round of applause. And I don't know why I'm saying that. Thank you. You've covered a lot of grounds for me. But I'm going to go back to the ground zero, which has to do with energy. Are we having the right conversation, brother from Transcorp Energy? Are we having the right conversation? When we say energy, are we devoting more time and resources to oil and gas as a means of electricity? Or are we having the right conversation and investment and spending energy towards baseload energy? That does not come from petrol and diesel. Now, that's a highly inflammable question. Be very careful how you answer it. I know you speak for power generation, but we have a whole lot to do along the value chain, even the last mile. So while you answer that question, the tail end of it is, are there still investment opportunities at the last mile to deliver electricity to the last man at the bottom of the pyramid?
Thank you, Boson. As a matter of fact, I don't speak for power generation. I speak for integrated power solution. I speak for the value chain. And I want to also draw from the statement you read out to us from President Kagame. Part of the bane that the power sector has had since 2012, when there was partial privatization, is that not having the holistic approach to issues.
Common interest.
Right? So you found, we started off with a situation where the distribution companies were focusing on distribution issues, generation companies were, driving their own interest, transmission company was, there wasn't really that value chain approach of what I'm doing at this end. How is the next man ready to, take it? Because if you remember primary economics, production is not complete, right? Yeah. Until the goods or services gets to the final consumer, to the last man. Right? But the good news is that we've come to that realization, right? We've come to that realization. Conversation has changed, right? And it's taking an integrated form, a hybrid, to be able to now deal with the energy challenges we're having. Even the developed countries is a hybrid. You have renewables, you have grid, you have off-grid and all that. How much more we have such a high deficit in terms of energy access? And that is where Transcore Energy comes in. So for Transcore Energy, we are driving renewable energy solutions to augment whatever we are getting from the grid. And so we're having both off-grid, on-grid solutions, and we cover different segments, whether it's a mini-grid or integrated mini-grid, which we're already partnering with some distribution companies to provide, or commercial and industrial. And that's about those that would take from upwards of 3 megawatts to about, 10, depending on what their need is. How does it work, right? Depending on the location, and I love what my colleague has said here, there are some locations, which again was a kind of fact that we lived in denial for many years. The truth today is that there are some locations that the grid cannot get to as at today. There are some locations that the grid gets to, but the distribution company cannot serve them because they are not commercially viable. These are the truths. So we are facing those truths now, right? And we are developing solutions that will now come in to fill the gap. The question is how rapid, how fast are we moving? And that is where we really need to, move fast. The private sector is driving this. They have to drive it, right? Government will continue to provide enabling policies and environment. And our experience in Transcore Energy shows that you have a lot of Nigerians, particularly in the CI category, right? Commercial and industrial, who are ready to pay. They are ready to pay for this power, for this electricity, right? Provided you can get it across to them. And it is only sustainable that we pursue that hybrid solution. That's the only way. But what it does for us is that it deals with a short-term issue, right? While we are getting our acts together and, doing better, improving on the grid and all that, we're already having combined electricity solution that is helping us drive the economy the way we're supposed to drive it, while we then begin to consolidate on a larger scale. So the conversation going on is correct, is good. It has changed, right? It's now a value chain approach that we're looking at, and that is the sustainable way to go for Nigeria. Thank you
so much, Christopher. Let's give a round of applause. I love that. Quite energetic. Dr. Adelano, when we talk about the AFCFTA and logistics and how we can get to be part of that, whether we like it or not, is happening upon us. Fortunately, we have our first delivery to Kenya, but we can do a whole lot more. But we need energy, I'm sure. So I will keep going back to the whipping boy of this, or the poster boy of this entire conversation. So, in terms of the AFCFTA, do you think there's still investment? What more can we do as businesses and companies to take advantage of that from a logistics point of view?
Thank you very much, sir. Just like I said earlier, that logistics is part of the sector that drives the economy. And one of the things that we are doing currently is supporting small business enterprise in a way of aggregation and consolidating their goods. We just did a delivery to Chicago last week for few women in business, moving samples of their products.
Nigerian women?
Nigerian women.
A round of applause. All the women in the room, please, make it louder. Give him an eye. Make it strong. Yes, please go ahead.
And what will impress you is that on arrival of the container, one single person bought the whole products on arrival. And you know the implication of that is that it's going to encourage the women to produce more now. If one or two people are doing one container, one person could be doing like five containers going forward now.
I just look in the room. I can see containers in the room.
Yeah.
Under the NBCC. My friend, you have another finder's fee.
Yeah.
I'm bringing you business. I'm going to get it. Yeah. But that is good. Give me the news. What's the size? Give me the size in dollar terms. Not the actual figure. Something I can work with.
I will tell you.
There's no any tax man in the room.
So what I'm trying to say here is, with the current government, they are doing a whole lot. They have a good policy for people in business. And this week, there's a program that's going on single window, national single window, in which I was also part of the program. So, looking at government policy, current government policy, it's actually helping to grow the economy in the logistics sector. Ease of doing business, because the national single window, we avail the opportunity where all the government agencies come into one, infuse them into one functions. So when it comes to issue of, because we're also a clearing agent, we have interface with customs every day, anti-bomb, police, many of them. This wastes a lot of time. And that's what government is trying to eradicate. So the present government are making business easy for those of us in logistics, even though the cost of diesel is still very high. And that make, people like you that patronize us pay more for efficiency. Because good logistics has to do with prompt delivery and cost effectiveness.
Thank you, Dr. Leonard. We appreciate that so much. Give me another round of applause, please. We'll go to Q&A very soon, but let me ask Dr. Adedipe this question on debt sustainability. And it's an issue. But again, as you were speaking today, just to inform everyone that as far as inflation target is concerned, the central bank has a program going on right now in Abuja on inflation targeting and monetary policy realignment. So I'm aware of that. So the central bank is having the monetary policy meeting, not the MPC, but getting some stakeholders in the room to take a second look at inflation targeting and what have you. So that is very, very important. Now let's get to debt sustainability. Yesterday, Ghana got about all the countries within the official creditor program to sign on a new $2.8 billion debt relief in the manner of speaking. And I keep wondering, how do the Ghanaians get these things done almost every time? They keep being able to work the debt with the creditors. And we've never defaulted. So that is a good thing. But everyone in this room, members of the NBCC, what you see is the country in terms of credit rating, in terms of what have you. So if Nigeria looks good outside, the corporate also look very good. So how do you think we should approach our debt sustainability issue, debt restructuring and all that? Give us that in about 1 minute or two, then we'll go to the audience, including those online. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so very much. Incidentally, I have 2 slides in my deck that speak to this. Number 1 is the fact that as an economist, there's nothing wrong with borrowing. But we say that you must borrow for what will enhance your capacity to repay and create further value. So what I observed in our debt position right now, that's the stock, is that it is dominated by bonds. And then, of course, when you look at our external debts, you find that it's also dominated by multilateral agencies. Now the World Bank, IMF is very tiny. And of course, AFDB. Those are the 2 big players there. So now if you pair that, you see that most of those loans are project tied, which is good for Nigeria. In which case you are not borrowing to fund recurrent expenditure, but you are borrowing to deliver projects. That is good. And I think that is also why Nigeria has a very, a fair rating in terms of debt capacity to start with, which makes you attractive to lenders. And of course, the other side is what you ask, debt sustainability. It shows clearly that, yes, you have capacity to pay. And like you mentioned, we have not defaulted at any time. In fact, when you look at the data up until September 2024, you see that principal and interest payments had been up to date. So no record of default. So all these things matter in terms of debt rating, which of course, whatever the government gets, like rightly said, is what falls back to the corporates. Unfortunately for us, when you approach, especially, Exim banks, let me use two of them, US Exim, China Exim, but US and UK in particular, you find that what they put as the risk premium for Nigeria is quite significant. And so that is an area we need to work on. I believe very strongly that Ghana engages. They engage. And of course, they show facts and figures that make them attractive. That's why they get all this, call it debt forgiveness.
I mean, transparency in public debt books.
Exactly.
Showing the books to the creditors.
Precisely. So, and I think the other side to it is it's not just project type, borrowing, and the cost of those projects. And that is the area I think we need to work on. Where cost is about value for money. So they see that more in Ghana than in Nigeria. So that's an area we need to work on.
So the unsaid message there is that it costs, we borrow, Ghana borrows, we spend more for the same projects.
That's right.
Than Ghana will deliver value.
That's right.
For their own money.
That's it. That's the only difference.
I got a consensus that from my seniors, they said that's the end of discussion. Please give Dr. Adidipe a round of applause. Now, let me go to the Q&A, and if you permit me, Mr. President, I'd like to start from Jude Chiemeka, the CEO of the Nigerian Exchange Limited, because I'm a student of the capital market, and I'm just trying to graduate to become a capital market ambassador. We need more companies on the stock exchange. We need the capital market to drive investment and support SWACO and others as well. Transcorp is listed. I'd like to see SWACO listed. I'd like to see Zenith Carex listed. BA and Associates can be listed as well. It's only NBCC that can be listed. Can we get a microphone for Jude Chiemeka? Let's give him a round of applause. He has a major event. In the next 2 hours or less, the governor of Kaduna State, he's hosting the governor of Kaduna State. Some sub-nationals are also coming to the market. But don't tell us about that yet. Let's wait until 2:30.
All right, thank you. Let me start by thanking NBCC for having this event. I think is really on point, and the theme is really what I think will really help drive growth in our economy. But having said that, I think that the NGX were really committed to helping corporates to raise capital. You've mentioned a few names. I was just looking at some of the logos there, and it's very interesting if you think about the performance of the index in terms of helping companies and even individuals to grow their wealth. In 2020 COVID year, the all-share index was 50% return. Obviously, the year after, the effect of COVID, it was 6%. Then the year after that, it was 19%. And last year, it was 37% all-share index return. The year before that, it was 46%. So it's been very good for all the stakeholders. But one thing is really clear. As a platform, we have really utilized technology to help drive financial inclusion, to also help domestic investors take advantage of emerging opportunities. So while the index has been performing positively, a market that had a 50-50 split of international investors and domestic investors has now narrowed to 80% domestic investors, which to our mind is a very good place to be. So we're now having more domestic investors participating in our market, unlike in the past, where it was largely 50-50 between international and domestic. And the other thing to also point out is in terms of retail investor participation in our market, today we have a market that is close to almost 1 million of retail investors participating in our market, thanks to our NGX Invest platform that was developed to help banks and other corporates take advantage in terms of the capital raise that is ongoing. So by and large, we think that all the reforms that was pointed out earlier, it's good for the economy. And I really must reiterate what the professor said, that when you start a reform, you don't go back. And I think it's clear now that we're going to start seeing the positives of all these reforms. I think the painful days, to my mind, are really behind us. We're now going to begin to see the benefit. What is really required is to stay the course and accelerate on the gains so that we can really maximize the outcome. Last year, we helped corporates facilitate over 7.4 trillion naira raised from our domestic market. And it's a good thing because as a platform, it's very viable. We're a multi-asset exchange, so it's not just an equities market. We have 321 securities that are listed on our exchange, 152 companies, 42 corporate bonds, 102 federal government bonds, and 8 state bonds, as well as 12 ETLs and 4 derivatives. So as a multi-asset exchange, we're providing investors opportunities to diversify and grow their wealth. We're also providing opportunities for corporates to take advantage of different asset classes to be able to meet their financial needs. So I think the NGX is also tied to the All African Exchange Linkage Project, which allows investors in Nigeria to trade into other markets across Africa. All of this is made possible by the funding of the platform by the AFDB. And we think that it makes it easier for corporates to be able to raise capital, not just in Nigeria, but across African markets. So that integration work is the next phase where we'll now start talking about settlement. So if you let me, I'll continue to go on.
I know. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. Let's clap. Let's give a round of applause to Jude. And let me just flesh out very quickly for 30 seconds on the last point he made about the African Exchange Linkage Project, because this is my audience. Now you can trade and you can buy shares in about 11 African exchanges outside Nigeria, in which you can buy not just MTN Nigeria. I'm sitting next to Nine Mobile. When you get listed, then you get the badge of honor. Yes. So get listed. So if you can buy MTN shares Nigeria, if you have MTN shares Nigeria, for example, you can buy MTN shares in Ghana. You can buy MTN shares of Uganda, for example. If you buy any company bank shares in Nigeria, you can buy that of Ghana, you can buy that of Botswana, you can buy that of Mauritius, you can buy that of Kenya. So right now, it is possible to go through Nigerian stockbrokers, and I think there are 10 or 11 of them. Jude, about 10 or 11 Nigerian brokers are in the AELP project? First 6, okay, 5. Okay, 6. Okay.
So the first phase is 6, and the next phase becomes open to all our trading license holders. And Nigeria really has the highest participation of trading license holders. We have over 188 trading license holders that different investors can approach to be able to take advantage of the opportunities across African markets. And all of this is done via technology. You may want to look at NGX Invest as a technology tool that we have also used to raise capital. Some of those tools will continue to fine-tune so that retail investors have a seamless platform they can use to engage the market.
Okay. One of the trading firms is here? That's the name of one of the trading firms.
Yes, Codros.
Codros Capital,
Yeah,
yes. So Codros is one of the stockbroking firms in Nigeria. If you want to buy, if you have the Dangote cement, you can buy Bamburi Cement. In Kenya, you can buy other cement company in other African exchanges through Codros Capital or any other. So you can just, now he's going to fine me because I'm now doing advertorial. Now I'm going to get fined. So I better stop there. They are their sponsors. Also, I get cover. So we can also do cross-African trading right now. So that means that we have an international exchange in Nigeria. we have about more than $1 trillion in total asset of all the companies within the African Exchange Project, so which is also very, very good. So you can diversify your portfolio, you can earn returns in any other currencies in Africa, not just Nigeria. So that's one investment opportunity that is available now under the African Exchange Linkage Project, and you can just want to look that up. That can also help a little bit. Now let's get to the Q&A to the floor, and online as well. If you have a cargo to Chicago first, I'm going to Chicago first. Those who have cargoes to deliver, I want to make money. NBCC, we need more.
Thank you very much.
Would you kindly identify yourself, sir, if you don't mind?
Thank you.
One question.
My name is Three. I have
Three.
Very quickly.
Okay, the first is Free. The other two are.
Okay. My name is Pharmacist.
Pharmacist?
Ignatius Anuhu. Yes, sir.
Pharmacist?
Yes, sir. So, thank you, NBCC, for this opportunity and the guest lecturer. Okay, first, when we normally have these economic outlooks, it's just like pure economics, exchange rate, inflation, and all of that. Now, how does corruption affect economics? We are talking about energy, telcos, infrastructure, and all of that. Previous years, we have had a lot of government investment in this, and they're derailed. Okay? Presently, we are going to France to defend certain things. So now, can we use those to factor in when we are talking about what could happen? Perhaps using successful initiatives in the past to encourage current initiatives and to say where we would have been if the previous ones had been successful. Now, this takes to maybe the third question. So, having economic outlook for 2025, can we do like a 3-year, 4-year? So we focus on the first year, and then 2 years coming, how do we see it playing out? Because once you normally come and do 1 year stuff, you forget the last year, you don't speak to the next year. So maybe NBCC could look at it moving forward. Then the third question, or now the second one. Pandemics. You mentioned pandemics as a major global disruption that everybody has to look at. It happened 2020 here in Nigeria, and it affected a lot of things. But now, when we are looking at the economy, nothing happens to health. How prepared are we in Nigeria? Should we have another pandemic? Will this economic outlook remain the same? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pharmacist. Dr. Adedepo, you want to take that very quickly? We're taking only 3 questions because of we're behind schedule.
Thank you so very much. Now, the first, you raised the issue of corruption. There's what we call the economics of corruption. All right? So, and what it means is that corruption is like a product. There are 2 sides to it. Okay? There's the person who is offering something in order to gain an advantage that takes him beyond a level playing ground. There's the receiver who also looks at that value as what comes in. I'll give an illustration here without mentioning names of countries. 2, transport ministers of 2 countries, one in Asia, one in Africa. Now, the one in Africa visited his friend in Asia. And while he was in his residence, his host took him to the window and pointed to a rail track. He said, take a look at that rail track. That project built this house I'm living in. He said, that's interesting. So now when there was a reverse visit to Africa, the African transport minister of that country took his guest to the window as well. I said, take a look. That rail track there delivered this property. And his guest now said, I can't see any rail track. Can you get the drift? Okay. One, there was really a rail track delivered. The other one, no rail track. And yet, some money left. Okay?
The rail track was in his house. Oh, his house was the rail track.
His house was the rail track. So now, that gives you an idea that corruption is all over the world. That's where I'm going to. So, in some economies, the process of corruption is retained within. That's why we talk about the economics of corruption. It is retained within the economy, and so that helps in one way or the other to drive economic activities. Place it with the banks give it out as loans to companies that in the process enhance their activities, create jobs.
Vietnam.
All right. In some others, the money is not kept within the economy, mostly in Africa, but it goes to fund activities in other geographies. So when you now come in here, there's also a place for every corporate entity. We have entered an era of no finger pointing. Because oftentimes when we talk of corruption, we think it is government. There's a lot more happening in the private sector. And so we have to look inwards. Every company developing a code. There was some work I did for Bank of Industry on this last year. Okay? That there's a framework for dealing with corruption in your own entity. So if each company begins to do that, then we gain a traction that will help us also deal with the public sector, where we think that is where corruption is endemic. That's on that side. You made reference to the pandemic. Okay? The pandemic is a global health crisis. The last one we had was 100 years before that of COVID-19. Okay? But the reality today, ladies and gentlemen, is that every country, including Nigeria, has learned a lesson in terms of dealing with a pandemic. We're in a better position today than we were in 2020, no doubt. So that is my direct answer to your question. But when you look globally, there's a projection that we'll have another pandemic this year, 2025. But of course, the chances of that happening from what is going on in the health space, and that's your space anyway, is that it's unlikely. But countries are better prepared today dealing with a pandemic coming from the experience of 2020 than we were at that time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe, for that. It's called productive corruption, and to go on that production. Because yes, the AFDB, the African Development Bank, about less than 10 years ago, spoke to us about it. Now, and they have that report. Some of the countries that have corruption were the most productive and have higher GDP. China, Taiwan, Vietnam, a lot of others. Indonesia. Because they kept the corruption within. They have what they call productive corruption, in which that railway is delivered, not the minister's house delivered. And that's where we're going. So if you find the heads of state of Burkina Faso buying 2 brand new aircraft for the country's national airline, instead of buying a private jet for himself, that gives you an idea of where you can go. But I don't want to say more than that. What needs to be delivered? The country needs an airline. They want to start running commercial viable airline because they just exited ECOWAS. So he's putting the interests of the country first rather than having a more comfortable brand new jet for himself. Madam, you have the floor, please. Please, a microphone for Madam, please, and very quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Buki Latunji. I'm former general manager from Zenith Bank PLC, now founder of Intel Figura Consulting. My question goes to the Professor Adedipe. When you were talking about interest rates and the outlook for this year and the stock market, I mean, being a former treasurer, we know there's an inverse relationship usually between the trajectory of increased interest rate and the capital market. So if I look back, 2023 September, the stock market growth was moving quite fast up till that February 2024, when central bank decided to start targeting inflation and they started moving the rates upwards. So there was a lot of, anxiety. What would happen and stuff like that. Well, for me, my question to you is like your opinion, because I was like, okay, this is really going to slow down. How? And we had hoped that things would really not be like that. But it really didn't slow down. So my question is, do you think it would have moved better if we were not targeting inflation like what CBN did? Or why did it happen that way? Because I was expecting really that inverse relationship and I didn't see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah. Excellent question. Now, since post-COVID, that's from 2021, stock markets and economies all around the world have changed. And that is why we say that you can't use the trends and patterns we had seen before COVID struck to interpret what is happening post-COVID. In fact, there's a particular table I have where I separated between the growth rate of stock market and the economy up on the 2019 and then from 2021 till date. It's a global phenomenon. But now applying that to Nigeria. So what that also has brought forward is that when we interpret data now, we keep that at the back of our mind. That we may not see the pattern and trends we had observed before COVID. That is what played out here. Just exactly as you said. I also expected that interplay between money market and capital market will happen last year with CBN increasing MPR, but it didn't play out so. Yeah. I mean, dampening from 45% to about 37% year-to-date return was not in any way comparable with the 50 basis points increase in MPR in the space of 9 months. So the patterns have changed, and that's why we must be closer now to the market in terms of monitoring and interpreting it. It also aligns with Outlook, as we said. We now do Outlook 4 times in a year. We do the same pattern with IMF and the World Bank. We do that in April. That is, take what has happened first quarter to update what we presented today. And then by July, we do a review of half year and then see how that changes the outlook for the year. And then we do another one in October. By the time we hit November, early December, we are talking of outlook for the next year. That's the pattern we now run with outlooks. And by the way, in your question, you talked about the NBCC doing outlook for 3-5 years. That is a strategy request. So that would be, it will be strictly for your entity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Adedepe. And very quickly for everyone, the central bank is also changing its monetary policy calendar. I'm sure we've all seen that already. So in case we haven't factored that in as businesses and analysts, I think we should factor that in. The central bank is now doing once every month meetings and longer. And that is a new trend. A few other African countries are adopting lesser number of MPC meetings per year. I think Namibia also have also reduced it to 5. So the first monetary policy delivery for this year will be in February. And the point that the central banks are making is that, look, there's a need to allow the system to work out the last decision before you come in again and say we're raising or we're lowering. So we're good, like you said, Dr. Adedepe, we're going to see a very smaller packet of interest rate cuts this year. The South Africa will deliver today. Outlook is 25 basis points, like they did in December. Just a bit of a gentle landing, a very soft landing, to allow for what had been done to begin to take effect. So we need to also, as analysts, as businesses and others, begin to factor in the fact that MPR will no longer be decided almost every other month. So that gives allow for the markets and the economy to assimilate and react, and then we can move to the next level. Let me say a very big thank you to my panelists. Please give them a round of applause. Dr. Adedepe, thank you very much for headlining the conversation today. Thank you very much from Nine Mobile, from Swatco. Thank you very much from Transcorp Power for energizing the conversation for energy. The question I didn't ask Nine Mobile is about the 50% tariff that they got on telecoms. I'm going to off my mic. I'm sure, because everybody's going to wait for you at the door. He said 50% was not enough. Give them a round of applause, please. And let me say thank you also to my Other panelists, all of them. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you very much. I hand over the microphone to my boss.
If you believe I'm his boss, you can believe anything. Another round of applause for the panel. There you have your seat, panelists. Go to your special table. That was an insightful and engaging session we've had. But we appreciate them once more before we continue. By the way, we have details of participants, so we're going to send a press presentation to every person that is here via email. He wasn't able to do a bit to the presentation because of time, so we had, in the presentation, you will see opportunities in different sectors, what might happen in 2025, sector-based. So we'll send copies of that presentation to every one of us. Without much ado, we're on the home run. I'd like to invite Mr. President, Chairman of Council, to come and appreciate, as we do at the chamber, the members of the panel and the moderator and the guest speaker. May we give a round of applause to Mr. President, please. First, Dr. Adilano. Let's appreciate Dr. Adilano. Assalamu alaikum. Media, please. MD of Zenith Capital, Zenith Carex International. They are sponsors as well. Thank you. Mr. Christopher Fiazilukwe, please. Eze Afolokwe. So, Mr. President had corrected me. Eze Afolokwe. MDC of Transcore Energy Limited. Eze Afolokwe. Ah, man, I've gotten it. Banigbe, Obafemi. Thank you. Transcore Energy Limited. A round of applause for them again. Mr. Obafemi Banigbe, CEO of 9 Mobile. Come and take your flowers as it is. And don't mind him, the 50% tariff increase. We're starting a protest next week with NLC for you to reduce it to 10%. Thank you. Reduce the cost. Thank you, Banigbe. And next is Dr. Theophilos Adewale Onodeko, the MD of SWACO. May we give him a round of applause, please? Professor Adedipe, the guest speaker, is your turn. That was an insightful session. Brought to play over 40 years experience in corporate Nigeria. Thank you so much for that insightful discussion. I'll be sending your presentation to all participants here. As an expose, his phone number, his email address, his home address is on that presentation. So if you need his service, you can go ahead. Then finally, last but not the least, Mr. Bosin Omofaye, well known without introduction. Our moderator who did excellently well, as he does all the time, both on TV and offline. And be assured that those commissions on finder's fee will get to you in USD, not in Naira. You don't want to send about it. That's nice. Thank you. Mr. President, you stay around. So I call the panelists and the moderator to come out for photo ops, please. All the panelists, the moderator, and the guest speaker. Media, take a cue from me. Once it's done, you do your job. Yes. Past President and Patron, Dr. Olaole Cole, please wait, please. And Deputy President Oshintoki should join, please. So we'll release our panelists. Our panelists can take their seat. Deputy President should join Mr. President and the moderator and the guest speaker. Prof, come back, please. Moderator, come back. Vice President. Pastor Adeyemi, Mrs. Anne Renu. After this, Mr. President and DP Oshintoki should stay behind. Our sponsors will take pictures with them. Thank you. Our sponsors, Codros, Saco, Zenith Carex, Ashgrove, Omni Sports, Omni Options, and 7-Up. I saw the MD of Saco. She left. All our sponsors, LRS, Lagos Internal Revenue Service, please come forward. The deadline for filing of tax returns is tomorrow. I repeat, tomorrow, January 31, 2025. There's a penalty for not filing. And there's a penalty for late filing as well. To be forearmed, to be forewarned, to be forearmed. Okay. I've said it. So, Mr. President, Deputy President Oshintoki should wait behind. ESCO members, please. Thank you. Our sponsors, DG. Members of ESCO, please. And council members, Mrs. Jumoke Kolusho, please. Prof, please join us. Mr. President, still wait. We're almost done. Programs Committee members, my Vice Chairman of the Programs Committee, Mrs. Ubirogba. You are in council, you are in programs again. Thank you, Mr. President. You stood enough for too long. And the last item on the agenda is vote of thanks. I have the privilege and honor to invite the Vice Chairman of the Programs Committee, Mrs. Adenike Birogba, to give the vote of thanks. May we appreciate her, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure with what has gone on this morning, we are all keying into what Dr. Abiodun Adedipe has said, that we should go into 2025 being very positive and that we should all make sure that we exist by making sure that when we go online, they can find us. So 2025, here we come. On behalf of the chamber, I would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Abiodun Adedipe, our moderator, Mr. Omofaye. I would like to also thank our panelists, Dr. Olamilekon Adelano, Dr. Adewale Onodeko, Mr. Femi Banigbe, and Mr. Christopher Eze Afolukwe. I think I got it right. President, I got it right? Good. I also like to thank our sponsors, Zenith Correct, SACO, the LIRS, Codros, Ashgrove Energy, 7-Up Bottling Company, and Omni Options. All you ladies and gentlemen, the programs committee, the NBCC headquarters for this event, thank you very much, because this wouldn't have happened if you all didn't show up. Kindly note the following upcoming events. The Next Generation series is scheduled to hold on Thursday, February 27, 2025. We also have the NBCC Health Walk, which is going to hold on Saturday, March 1, 2025. The NBCC International Women's Day is scheduled to hold on Thursday, March 6, 2025. And we have the 2025 Trade Mission to the UK in April 2024. I'd love to invite everybody, if possible, here to try and key into this mission and see how we can grow our business and facilitate a better network, increase our network between Nigeria and Britain. Also note that this plaza is open. It has a state-of-art facilities for you to explore your corporate events, training, seminars, and meetings at affordable rates, irrespective of the fact that we are in Band A. Our rates are very, very affordable. You can reach out to the chamber headquarters members to make inquiries or reservations. If you are not already a member of the chamber, please, we'd like to invite you to become a member. Visit our website, which is www.mbcc.org.ng, or meet with any member of the membership committee or even any representative of the chamber present here at the reception. Once again, thank you all for coming, and please follow us on all our social media platforms to be better informed of our activities. Like Dr. Adedipe said again, I'm not going to read our Instagram handle or our British Chamber combo of handles. Just put us and you know that we exist. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Mrs. Biro. Another round of applause. The Vice Chairman of the Programs Committee. All is well that ends well. C'est fini. And it's done. Have a good day. Enjoy the remainder of the day. And it was nice having you at our plaza. Thank you. Thank you. You can appreciate yourself by actually clapping for yourselves.